Hello, everybody out there in YouTube and LinkedIn land. I am Dr. Caroline Brookfield here with another episode of Creative Lifescaping. Find out how people who you wouldn't think are creative use creativity, everyday creativity, to make their life better, or how they've used creativity in their life to get a little bit more spark and a little bit more energy. I am so excited to introduce our next guest. Robin Glickstein is a market researcher turned voiceover talent and podcaster. She's worked with Beatrix Research and Consulting for 20 years, helping build a solid track record of providing rigor, tenacity, and insight to uncover strategic insights. She has a blog and an upcoming podcast, very creative, called The MindFULL Creative that marries her voiceover and marketing expertise. I'm so excited to welcome Robin. Hi, Robin.
Hi, Dr. Caroline. Thank you for having me.
Oh, just call me Caroline. I just put doctor in there because people told me I should.
Okay. Hi, Caroline. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to see you here. So, Robin, you've done most of your professional career has been in market research, focus groups, getting strategic insights. Is that what you wanted to be when you were a kid? Tell me how you got to be into market research as a job.
Oh, my gosh. No, I did not want to be that as a kid. I didn't even know what market research was until I actually fell into it. So my background started in PR, moved into sales promotion on the client and agency side, fell into PR also, fell into sales promotion, and then had an experience with a kid who was through software at a museum where I was a docent. And one thing led to another. And I ended up back in graduate school, getting a master's in technology and education, designing software for kids. At the end of my software design class at the party, my professor said, "You will die in this field. You are not meant to be behind a computer. HTML is not your language." And I'm like, oh my God, could you have told me that before I did this?
After I wrote the check, right?
Right. So, I believe, Carolyn, that when you hear things twice, pay attention. And two people said to me, "Have you ever thought about consumer research?" And I'm like, what? And this was at the end of getting my master's. There happened to be a professor at Harvard Business School who does a very creative form of consumer research. And two people said, "You should call this professor Jerry Zaltman." I'm like, I can't call Jerry Zaltman. He's a Harvard Business School professor. And they encouraged me, and I did. I went in for an informational interview. I loved what he was doing. He spoke my language, and he hired me on the spot. So I ended up not doing software design for kids. I ended up doing consumer research. Jerry taught me, put me in his lab, and it was there that I met Randy Cohen, who owns Beatrix Consulting, and off we went.
I love that. I'll be straight up honest. I don't love a lot of the things I've read about Steve Jobs, but one of the things I love is his quote that says, "You can't connect the dots going forward, only backwards." Right?
Oh.
So I'm always curious about the dots because, like you said, most people don't want to be, a market researcher when they're a kid. And so it's always curious to me, like how people nudge up against these opportunities like you did. And then how how do you stay open to that versus, no, I just got a degree in, software design. That's what I need to do.
Yes.
And I think that's a lot of what holds people back from being creative is that dialogue about what should be versus saying yes and taking an opportunity like you did.
Yeah, the should be is a big one. I mean, it was a big time for me, and my friends were going off to really exciting and sexy places doing this work. But then I met Jerry, and that was opened up a world for me as well. I have had the honor of talking to thousands of people in amazing companies across any domain you can imagine.
Yeah. And so tell me what instantly appealed to you. Like, it sounds like your professor had to tell you that you were not designed to be behind a computer. So how did you, what was the light bulb that made you realize that talking to people and facilitating focus groups was something that was a good alignment with your what you want to do and your skills?
Well, I don't think I really knew until I started to do it. So, Jerry shared with me the process and then said, just try it on. And I tried it on. But, I've always chatted with people. I sit next to somebody on the plane, or I, interned as a kid in Washington when I was in college and sat next to a couple and they ended up dancing at my wedding. And, I meet people along the way. And that's what I think has made my life so rich is, look, you and I met the way, you never know who you're going to have a conversation with. And sometimes I don't want to talk. I mean, I've been known to put my earbuds on in the plane. However, I waitressed, I've worked in a department store. I've always had a job that has engaged the public.
Mm.
So I think it just was learning how to use that and nurturing that with additional skills, with taught skills, learned skills.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that really struck me is what you said is that you didn't know you had to try it on. And so much of what we resist is because we fear that ambiguity. And I think that's a really key for what you said as far as like all of the different things you've done. You were willing to step into that ambiguity, not knowing if you would love it or not, but you were willing to try it out. And maybe it would have been a year and you would have left, but it turned into a 20-year career, doing something you love. So I think that really, to me, really makes me think of this ambiguity piece and that you're willing to step into that ambiguity.
Well, I think also, it comes for me as well from the person sitting across from me. And I was fortunate to be sitting across from somebody who, I wanted to be with and know more and learn from. I thought consumer research was quantitative.
Oh.
And I will say, I'm not a numbers girl. And this wasn't quantitative, it's qualitative. I didn't even know that existed. I had a preconceived notion until I learned otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. Like what we don't know is so limiting because you don't know what you don't know. So what do you think, how would you define creativity? You've got a blog, the Mindful Creative, obviously creativity with your voiceover work that you're doing that we're going to get to, but tell me, what is your definition of creativity?
Yeah, I think, for me, creativity really just simply comes down to how we see things in more than one way. It's just looking at something and being able to see it a little bit differently. And that can come in so many ways and forms. It can be, using our intellect. It can be using our hands. It can be using our voices. It can be using our hearts, our spirits, our, music. Words, numbers. My husband's a number guy. He's super creative.
Yeah, I often see that people say they're not creative, but they just don't call their creative stuff creative. They call it work or hobby.
Look at things and how you can maybe even change the way you see something.
So tell me how you use creativity in your work as in market research, like as far as with the qualitative, I would guess there's some room to be a little bit creative. Tell me what was the most creative part about doing market research?
Yeah. Well, two parts. The first part I would say that was creative, actually Randy was and is brilliant at. And that was understanding the needs of the clients and then crafting the methodology to help them meet their needs. And I mean, she's just brilliant. And the part that I was involved in with actually interviewing folks, I think what attracted me to this kind of consumer research was we used pictures and objects to understand people's thoughts and feelings about products and services. So you would get a homework assignment and you would bring me 4 pictures and a couple of objects that would help me understand how you thought and felt, and we'd use it as a jumping off point to sort of peel back the layers to your subconscious thoughts and feelings around whatever it was we were talking about. So pictures, objects, metaphors, to understand what you think and feel, and then how the folks who are interested in hearing what you have to say can use that to create whatever they need to create.
Yeah, I love that idea of using pictures because, pictures say 1,000 words, right? And Did you find, this makes me think of your journey to becoming a market researcher. Did
Yeah.
you find that you uncovered stuff about people they didn't even know about themselves?
Oh my God. I'm sorry for laughing.
Was that like dumb marketing research question 101? Like, oh
No,
yeah.
no, I'm only laughing because when I think about the work over the years and the conversations I've had, and it's almost, how can I gracefully say this? People will start to tell, like we could be talking about, I don't know, let's say the client was a financial services institute. We're talking about money. And before you know it, they are crying. And I'm like, wow, okay, we've really touched on something here. They didn't really get that they were feeling so, they were like that the feelings they were having about the person who was helping advise them were tied into something they hadn't really thought about. And then all of a sudden, it comes to them in this interview, and
It's like you pulled the plug on something that's been building
yes,
up.
it happens a lot. And it's
Wow.
not, it can be in across, as I said earlier, so many domains. So yes, I've heard so much. Once somebody told me that, like our picture led us to another conversation. And before I know it, he was talking about his wife having an affair with the bank teller. And I was like, okay, so where do you go with that?
And how does that affect all of your thoughts and feelings about, something that's really important to your life, because
Right.
you've got such an emotional and personal cloud that affects that.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. It's almost like therapy. Like, did you ever feel like a therapist?
Sometimes. I mean, I would, people would be might be tight-lipped in the beginning of the interview. And then by the end, like, well, let me see if there's any more questions. And they're like, oh, time's up. And I'm like, yeah, time's up.
Well, it's a skill. I mean, as a very skilled interviewer with all your experience in so many different domains. And just for anybody joining us a bit late, I'm interviewing Robin Glickstein, who is a market researcher turned voiceover talent. And we're talking about creativity in market research. And also, we're going to talk very soon about her creative foray into voiceover talent and her blog. But Robin, I'm curious about, with your experience, if you were to talk to somebody who really wants to get a deeper connection with either, a colleague or a loved one, or, their audience, their customers, are there any like techniques or things that you did specifically to help people feel more connected to you?
To feel more connected to me, or more
Well,
connected?
just to open up, like you're describing these
Yeah.
people who were like opening up to you and they're excited to talk, and when they first were like resistant. So how did you get people from going to like resistant, they didn't really want to talk, to like opening up to you like they did?
Oh, what a good question. I
Is that a
wonder.
loaded question? Is that like a big
No,
thing?
I don't know. I think that I definitely do my very best to be present and to really just sit across from the person I was sitting across from, if it was a one-on-one, and to actively listen and to try and show them in, I don't know, by maybe the way I was looking or the questions I was asking, that I was really with them, and that this time with them was an honor,
Mm-hmm.
and what they had to say really mattered.
Mm-hmm.
So I try that. Focus groups are a lot harder. I did focus groups for many years. I fell in again with the Bass Pro Shops. And look at me. Do I look like I mean, clearly I'm not their target audience. And so that was quite the adventure. For many, many years, I traveled in their focus groups. And getting hunters to open up and tell me what they think and feel, I definitely had to sing and dance. And, they looked at me like I didn't know anything. And the point was, it wasn't what I knew, it's what they knew.
Right.
And so helping them recognize, Joe, what you've got to say is really important. You're the expert here.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, it sounds so simple, but so hard, right? Just like listening and making people feel important and making them, know that you want to hear what they have to say. The easiest and hardest thing to do, probably.
Right. And some people have a real, they can't. They just can't. And maybe that's where the tenacity comes from, is, hanging in there and digging and helping in any way. And sometimes it works. And, the truth is sometimes it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, and there's a parallel for me with that, with creativity, because a lot of people get to a point where they're like, they think they've got an idea, but it's really just an incremental kind of boring improvement. And it makes me think, is that like with interviewing people, you get to a point where a lot of people be like, okay, I have what I need, but they have to have that tenacity to push through and like really get to the meat of the potatoes, or whatever the expression. That's not the expression, but you know what I mean.
yes. And there's always more to get to.
Okay. Yeah, true.
Right. I mean, you can decide where you want to stop. And you can always keep on going, but maybe that's creative as well, knowing when to stop and knowing when to go on.
And that you're never going to get all the answers. Like, why do you get to the point? Yeah.
Never. Mm-mm.
So tell me, okay, so now let's shift into your voiceover work. So it feels to me pretty random that you went from market research to voiceover. Like, what was the, was it Jerry, the professor you spoke that got you into market research?
Jerry Zaltman.
Jerry Zaltman. What was the Jerry Zaltman moment for you for voiceover?
What a good question. So when I started in PR, back in the olden days, we had a book. You would write a cover letter and you'd send the cover letter and the press release to an editor, and then you had to follow up with a phone call. And you had to cut through the clutter to get the editor to hear, to take your call and to do a placement on your client. So I learned how to use my voice to basically convey something about the client over the phone. And then we lived in Cleveland for a little while when my husband graduated from business school. And I volunteered at NPR, and somebody quit. And I had helped with some writing, and the station manager said, do you want to try and do the news and traffic? I need some help. And I'm like, I'd love to. Super scared. Oh my gosh, that little light would go on, but I did it, and that was fun. And then in this, in my master's in technology and education in my software design class, I ended up doing the voices for a lot of friends' final software projects. And it kind of became a little bit of a joke. Like, their project would go up and we'd all be sitting there and it would be my voice, and then somebody else's and it would be my voice. And in my own project, learning how to manipulate my voice. And I really enjoyed that. And people have commented on my voice throughout my time, like if I've been interviewing somebody or. So I knew that I had an interest in it. And I have an only daughter, and she has just launched. And so I'm in that time of my own life, like many folks find themselves around my age, where what's next? And, the question of what did you like to do as a kid, and referring back and things along the way. And I said, you know what, I'd like to explore using my voice. So my purpose for so long was to listen. And now I think it's to share what I hear and the different ways that I can do that. So I started taking classes. I just signed up at the Denver Center for Performing Arts. I took voiceover classes. I had an amazing teacher. She's become my private coach. I take classes online on Zoom around the country. I'm in different groups through Facebook and different just groups that I've learned about through classes I've taken. And my husband helped me build a little sound booth in my basement. So since my daughter, is gone, that whole creative space that we use transformed as well. So I'm in this transitional period of, I work, in market research, I've always worked on a project basis. It's not been a 9 to 5, 5 day a week.
Okay.
It's when Randy needs something or Bass Pro is on the road, I would work. So I've been fortunate to have time around me as well to nurture things that speak to me. Volunteer, be part of my community, be part of my daughter's school, feed myself. So that's just kind of where I've landed. And I've decided, you know what, Carolyn, I just really want to have some fun.
Who doesn't, right?
Right? Research
Hopefully.
wasn't fun. It was, but I want to, like, I don't know, just have conversations. I talk to people anyway, and there's so much out there to read and learn and hear and do and share. And it's in the sharing that I feel like my energy and my life have some texture. And that's important to me. So,
Yeah, I think so many people, get to the point where there's a life transition, like whether it's, kids leaving the house or something.
mhm.
And I see that a lot. And people think back, like, is this all there is? It's like you've been climbing this ladder and you get to the top and you're like, where's the deck chairs and the pina coladas? It's still just stinky exhaust and like, some garbage at the top. And you're like, it should be better than this, right? So I hear that a lot, and I myself
Yes.
feel that, like trying to reconnect with this joy and what makes us happy. And I wonder, there's a few things, so this might be a bit convoluted, but I wonder, when you're talking about this idea of having space and time to explore your self-care and interests through your contract work, do you think that might be what people are looking for in this whole great resignation? Like, it just really, I feel like so many people are in careers that don't give them space to explore what you had an opportunity to do. And I wonder, like, is that what people are looking for? What do you think?
Oh, what a great question. Such good questions.
Sorry.
I'd be projecting maybe if I answered
Mhm.
to yes.
Mhm.
Um, but I do see around me, I look at my daughter, I look at my
Mhm.
husband, he works in an office, but he works from home 1 day a week.
Mhm.
And he's different in that time than I'm sure he is in the office. And for her as well, having the opportunity to do some other things at the same time, I think is becoming more and more important to people. Yes. And they're seeing that they can do it. And there are tools and there are ways, like this conversation right now. Being able to have this conversation with you, I don't know that I would have even considered it 2 years ago.
Mhm.
And think about all the classes I took on Zoom. I mean, I've
Mhm.
taken everything on Zoom with folks
Mhm.
in LA that I never even knew I could do.
Mhm.
Um, so I want to integrate that into the way that I work as well. It's more important, maybe. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it does. It's this integration, and I think you're
Yeah,
exactly right. Like, through the nature of your work, it naturally gave you that opportunity, but other people don't even know it's possible. And with the change with COVID has brought us is that you can have a more integrated life, and you can have a life that's not either professional or fun, or like that there is some kind of blending, and having the confidence like you've done to step into that NPR booth or to take that risk to take a job you didn't know if you were going to like, step into the ambiguity of saying, I don't know what it's going to look like, but I'm willing to take the risk that it could be better, is kind of what I think.
it's interesting because it's your perspective.
Yeah.
To me, to be honest, sometimes I think I didn't follow a path.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm surrounded by people who said, I'm going to be this. And
Mm-hmm.
you talked about being at the top of a field
Mm-hmm.
and successful. And the truth is, I can look at what I've done and say, I started out doing this and I ended up doing this and I ended up doing this. So there's a balance in there, I
Mm-hmm.
think, of combining what we like and what we do in a way that enables us to try on something else and not just put a stake in the sand and say this is it.
Right. Yeah, it's that kind of juxtaposition of like you've mentioned before, tenacity and a drive and a perseverance to go after our goals, because sometimes people don't realize how much effort and tenacity and time it takes to get to somewhere,
Right.
versus, not hopping around just because you don't want to put the work in, but also having that stake, but staying a little bit open to like an opportunity that might nudge your stake in like a
Right.
slightly different direction, right? So
And sometimes life nudges your stake.
yes, true.
How do we, pivot and respond and creatively interpret that experience?
Yeah.
Maybe that opens the door to something
Hmm.
that we couldn't turn the knob on ourselves.
Yeah, that's so true. Like, sometimes you open the doors to walk through, and sometimes the door presents itself to you. And I guess sometimes whether you walk through or not, it's one of those things that just happens in life. I'm speaking with Robin Glickstein, who is a market researcher turned voiceover talent. And I've got your website up here, Robin, where people can find you. And also you've got your blog about being mindful creative,
Yeah.
mindfulcreative.com.
Yes.
I would love to know a few things. So I would love to know what you would tell someone. So someone's like, oh my goodness, I can't even imagine stepping into an NPR studio and recording my voice, or I can't even imagine, someone telling me to go a totally different direction with my career. What would you tell people that are trying to do something different, maybe something creative, like going into voiceover work? How would you tell them, how would you tell them to get started if they're feeling a bit stuck from your perspective?
Well, I sat next to somebody on a plane once. His name was Rob. I don't know anything about him. I don't remember his last name or what he did, but we had a conversation. And we actually talked about that. When something's big, how do you begin? And this was what he said. Eat the elephant one bite at a time.
Yes.
I had never heard that before. So I do think about that. So pick one thing. And maybe that is making a list of people you know who are, is the word tangentially,
tangential?
Well,
I'm in Canada, so we say words differently. Tangential, like something a little bit off to what you're doing?
Yeah.
I say tangential. You Americans might say something totally different.
Tangential. Don't ask me to spell it.
I was going to say, I'm going to send you a voiceover thing and put that word in there just on purpose.
There is a Google that you can do that will tell you how to pronounce it. In any event, I digress. So I would say make a list and see who on the list you actually feel safest with. And go to that person and see and do sort of an informational interview. This is what I'm thinking about doing, and I'd like to learn more about it. Is there somebody you can suggest that I could just have a conversation with? You're not asking anybody for anything. You're just trying to learn. And I would start there and just trying to learn. And what I have found, and which I suspect you have as well in like our Dan Pink group, raise your hand and ask for what you want. And does anybody know anybody who I might talk to? I want to learn more about voiceovers. And they may raise their hand back and say, oh my gosh, yes, it turns out that my nephew does voiceovers. And could I talk to your nephew? And the nephew says, I'm happy to talk to her. And then you learn, and the nephew says, well, you should have a coach. Well, how do I find a coach? Well, I found my coach by XYZ. Oh, okay. Or join Facebook's a whole nother conversation, but there are 100,000 groups on Facebook. If you just type in a word, you might find a group. And my experience is people in those groups are there because they want to help each other. So it
sounds a lot like just taking tiny steps, but be open to what throws at you. Because you might think you want to do voiceover, and then maybe it turns out you actually want to do like singing or something. I don't know, something different, right? But it's taking those steps and being open to the process, but taking the steps to do that work. I think it sounds like. And what are your biggest obstacles to creativity, and how do you get over those?
Oh, wow. Well, for sure, fear of doing it right.
Yeah.
I can get kind of caught in that. I can get caught in perfection, becoming the enemy of good enough. And the way I overcome it is I'm pretty lucky, Carolyn. I have some amazing people in my life, really creative friends, both intellectually and emotionally. I have a really, really nice husband who has great perspective and helps me see things differently, and my daughter does as well. I read a ton. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen and look at what you do, and some other folks as well. And so one of the funny things that I do, I read, I listen, I process with people that I trust and who I think are creative, emotionally, and tactfully. But I also, I brought this little rock. I don't know if you can see it, but Glickstein means lucky stone. And so we go to Cape Cod sometimes, and there's this beach I love, and they have these little flat black stones, and I collect them. I have a bowl on my shelf of them, and I give them to people. I keep them for myself, and I imbue them. This sounds kind of ooey gooey, doesn't it? With my intention.
Mhm.
And so when I'm scared, like before I work, sometimes I used to get scared. I mean, it's intense.
Mhm.
And I would imbue my intention, and I would keep the rock in my pocket so I could touch it,
Mhm.
you know, or to remind myself of whatever my intention was or what I wanted to know. So that helps me overcome my fears sometimes. And then, you know, to bring in my creativity, I drink water from my orange water cup, because orange, the chakra is, your sacral chakra is orange. The color's orange, and that's for creativity.
Oh, that's
I,
funny. Orange is one of my brand colors, but I didn't know that's what that, that
orange
the
is the color of
connection.
creativity. Yeah, there
I
you
love
go.
it. So it sounds like a talisman. That's interesting.
Yes.
I think I've used talismans, if you are okay with me calling it that, in the past. And I think there's something about a tangible item that just anchors you into that moment,
Yes.
that intention that you're talking about.
Yes,
So,
and so does smell. Sometimes I'll put lavender on a cotton ball, and I'll find a way to keep the cotton ball nearby, or maybe on my hand. And I'll be like, really? Tell me more about that. And I smell myself. Why is she smelling herself?
I just have this picture of my clients bringing their pets in, and I'm just like soaked in lavender. Like, what did your breeder say you should do again?
Right.
Oh, I love those. I love like the talisman and the scent. I think those are excellent suggestions to help people feel connected to their overall purpose, that helps them get over those little hurdles that kind of keep us from, pursuing a big goal.
Yeah. And
This is, sorry.
listening, like podcasts, you know, everybody out there is talking about,
Yeah.
you know, this is something we all share.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we learn from each other when we say it out loud.
We do. And it's so funny that we met. I forgot that we met through the Dan Pink community.
Yeah.
And speaking of like, we're over time. Are you okay for time? I'm always over for time.
I am, as long as you are.
Yeah, I'm okay. It's my podcast. I can do what I want. That's one good thing about being in charge, right? I'm just going to do what I want. So one of the things about, you talked about like just reaching out to people.
Yeah.
I think I told you this story. I don't know if I've mentioned this on the lives before, but when I was writing my book, which has just gone to formatting, I was thinking about like, okay, who could I help to make sure this book is really good, or maybe give me some feedback. And Dan Pink sent out a newsletter saying he was looking for people with a no regrets tattoo. This is about a year ago. This is for his book that's like it's in pre-sale right now.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I have no hesitation. I answered him not expecting a reply. And I said, hey, if I find you someone with a no regrets tattoo, will you read part of my book? And he replied himself, I'm assuming, and said, if you find me someone with a no regrets tattoo, I will read your whole book.
Wow.
So, okay. So I went on Facebook. I went on all my network, all my comedian network. I'm like, who would have a tattoo? It'd be like comedians. So I offered $50 to the first person who had a no regrets tattoo that would be willing to speak to Dan Pink. Cause I'm like, having Dan Pink read my book, even part of it is worth like, way more, like it's priceless. So I found 5 people with a no regrets tattoo, but they were all spelled incorrectly. Apparently it's a thing. Speaking of learning about people and learning things, it's like, and like RAGRETS, like it's a joke.
Oh.
That they get it wrong, like no regrets, but I have this like misspelled tattoo.
Okay.
Anyway, so I found him the people, and then I said, don't, I know you're really busy. He said like, no, I'm totally happy, and send it to me about a month before publication. And I'm hoping he'll give me a jacket quote. That's what he said. So you just never know what's going to happen when you just randomly reach out to people, right?
I love that. Good on you, man. That is really impressive. Well, he's intimidated, but you know what? He's a guy. He's just, and
he seems so lovely, even just in his videos, like
just 100%.
Yeah. So 100%. Don't be afraid to reach out to people, anybody in your network. I'm going to get all these like hate mails from people who are like, stop telling, this is going to go on longer, but I put this in the book as well. I put that story about Dan Pink in my book.
Oh, fun.
And when I was in high school, I tried to call George Michael, from like the
Wham?
Yeah. Yeah. So I went to the payphone at the mall, and I dialed because at that time there's no cell phones or anything. I dialed the operator.
Yeah.
And then I said, I want to make a collect call to England. So they put me through to the operator in England. And she was like, who are you trying to call? And I used his original name, like I was a fan. And it was Panayotu, I think was his real name. I was like, I'm trying to call, George Panayotu. He lives in Kensington. The operator in like a true British accent says, you can't collect call a pop star.
Oh my goodness.
You never know, right?
You never know, right? Because they may. You don't know if you don't ask. And some people, I will say, I have asked, and I've been surprised at what I haven't gotten. It's not like people always say yes. And that surprises me, right? And I have been like, and that's part of it.
It's just meeting people at the right time, at the right place, everything aligns.
Yes.
And I also know that it's important to respect your boundaries, and, people have only a limited amount of time, but
Absolutely.
I think it doesn't hurt to reach out. It doesn't hurt to try something new.
Absolutely.
And this has been so fun, Rob. Sorry.
Generally they do, and sometimes people do say yes, and sometimes they do say no. But you don't know if you don't ask.
Right. Exactly. That's so true. This has been such a wonderful conversation, Robin. I'm not going to let you off the hook. We're at Truth or Dare. I want you to quickly tell me a story, a true story that you felt you felt a little embarrassed, or you felt like, you were a bit nervous about the situation.
Okay. I did think about a couple of things, and just because I had seen you ask somebody, and I was like, what am I going to get? But I once was doing a focus group with a group of hunters. This is really embarrassing.
I love it. This is the perfect kind of question.
And they were tough. They were really tough. And there was one guy in particular. And so I would sometimes stand up and I'd walk around. And I had my guide, and I rolled it up and I walked around, and there was a guy, and I tapped him on the shoulder. I'm like, come on, Joe, help me understand what you're thinking here. Give me something. And he's like, well, honestly, this is kind of hard because I can't believe I'm going to say this. Well, he's the one that said it. He said, because, I tend to be anal. And I'm like, well, that's okay. Help me understand what anal is, because I like it. I mean, tell me about being, what did I say? He says something like, tell me about anal. And all of a sudden the room stops. Everyone looks at me. I can hear behind the glass the 17 guys from basketball. They are guffawing. The room erupts. All the hunters start laughing, and everyone's looking at me, and I'm like, wow, that did not come out the way I meant. I was just trying to, oh my God. I was mortified. And so when that focus group was over, they definitely gave me some grief.
Well, I'm just glad you did. Well, maybe you did get a nickname after that.
No. And I think after a while, they did settle down, but that was definitely, he was using it one way, and all I said was, tell me about anal, huh?
Just a small switch in the way it's said, and
exactly, they were off and running. So yeah,
I love it. That would be embarrassing.
I was very embarrassed.
But you know what? They're probably still telling that story, so it gave them something to laugh about.
Yes.
Well, Robin, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your story about market research and voiceover, your adventures in voiceover talent. If you want to find Robin, she's on LinkedIn. She's probably tagged to this live broadcast. You can also find her at robinglickstein.com. And thank you so much for making me laugh so much today. And it was such a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you for the honor of being here. I really enjoyed it, and I love your work, and I'm glad we're connected.
Thank you. Yeah, I can see many more synergies in our future.
And you'll be a guest on my podcast.
I will. Yes, I'm excited to see it.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.